They thought they were stealing my company and my life. What they didn't know was that I held all the cards, and I was about to play the ultimate hand that would change everything forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The champagne was still fizzing in my glass when I heard my name mentioned through the thin conference room walls. I had arrived early for our Monday morning strategy meeting at TechFlow Solutions. It's the software company I'd built from nothing 3 years ago in downtown Austin. The spring air carried the usual energy of South by Southwest season, but something felt different that morning. Something that would shatter everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. Alex has no idea what's coming. Ryan's voice drifted through the glass partition, followed by a laugh I'd never heard from him before. Cold, calculating. Once we present the expansion proposal to the investors next week, we can structure it so Alex becomes a minority stakeholder. The company will finally have proper leadership. I froze, my hand still gripping the door handle to the conference room. Ryan Matthews had been my business partner for 2 years, someone I'd brought into TechFlow when we started landing bigger clients. We'd met at a networking event during SXSW, and his background in business development seemed like the perfect complement to my technical skills. I'd trusted him with everything, even let him handle most of our external relationships while I focused on the product development that I loved. But what about Alex's feelings? "At," was Emma's voice. My fiancée of almost a year, Emma Rodriguez. The marketing coordinator I'd fallen for at a coffee shop on Rainy Street. The woman who wore my grandmother's ring and had been planning our wedding for next fall. I mean, we've been together for 2 years. Won't this seem a little suspicious? Emma, baby, you're overthinking this. Ryan's tone had shifted to something intimate, possessive. Alex is brilliant with code, but clueless about business. The company needs someone who understands scaling, investor relations, market positioning. We've been carrying this operation while Alex plays with algorithms. The blood drained from my face as I realized what I was hearing. This wasn't just about business. The way Ryan called her baby, the casual intimacy in their voices, the coordinated plan they'd obviously been working on together. My business partner and my fiancé weren't just plotting to take my company, they were having an affair. I just feel terrible about the engagement, Emma continued. And for a moment I thought I heard genuine remorse in her voice. Alex proposed. With such sincerity, and the ring is absolutely beautiful, those emeralds from the grandmother's collection. Look, you said yourself that Alex is more like a comfortable friend than a passionate lover, Ryan replied dismissively. We have real chemistry, real ambition. Alex is content building small business automation tools forever. We're thinking bigger picture here. Fortune 500 clients, IPO potential, real wealth. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to get what you deserve. I sank against the wall outside the conference room, my mind racing. 3 years of building TechFlow from my cramped apartment, investing every penny of my inheritance from my grandparents, working 18-hour days to create something meaningful. I'd brought Ryan in when we landed the restaurant chain account, thinking I needed someone to handle the business side while I focused on developing our proprietary software platform. I'd been so grateful for his help, so relieved to have a partner who could navigate investor meetings and client presentations while I did what I loved most. And Emma, sweet, supportive Emma, who'd encouraged me through every late night, every stressful client call, every moment of doubt about whether TechFlow would succeed. She'd been my anchor, my motivation, the person I'd imagined building a future with. We'd talked about expanding the company together, maybe starting a family once we were more established. I'd given her complete access to our business plans, our financial projections, even our client contracts. She knew everything about TechFlow's operations. The beauty of this plan, Ryan was saying, is that Alex will think it's a natural evolution. We bring in these investors, they'll want experienced leadership. And suddenly I'm CEO while Alex stays on as CTO. Alex gets to keep doing the technical work without the responsibility of actually running a real company. And then we can be together openly, Emma added. Hate sneaking around like this. Last week, when Alex surprised me with dinner reservations at Foreign and Domestic, I had to pretend I hadn't just spent the afternoon with you at the Four Seasons. The Four Seasons. I remembered that night. Emma had seemed distant, distracted, checking her phone constantly. When I'd asked if everything was okay, she'd blamed work stress and suggested we postpone our wedding planning discussion. I'd been so concerned about her well-being that I'd offered to take on more of the wedding arrangements myself. Don't worry about Alex, Ryan continued with disturbing confidence. The technical talent will always have value, but vision and leadership are what create real success. Alex built a nice little consulting firm, but we're going to build an empire. I heard chairs scraping against the floor, indicating they were preparing to end their private meeting. Quickly, I stepped away from the conference room and ducked into the break area, grabbing a coffee mug with shaking hands. Sophia Kim, my assistant and one of our first employees, looked up from her laptop with concern. "Alex, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice gentle but worried. "Everything okay?" Sophia had been with TechFlow since the early days when we were working out of a shared workspace downtown. She'd believed in the company's potential when we barely had enough clients to pay the rent, and her loyalty had been unwavering through every challenge we'd faced. Looking at her genuine concern, I realized how differently she treated me compared to the calculated performance I'd just witnessed. "Just processing some unexpected information," I managed to say, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Sophia, do you have the original incorporation documents handy? I need to review something." "Of course," she replied, already pulling up files. On her computer? "Is this about the expansion proposal Ryan mentioned last week?" He seemed pretty excited about bringing in external investors. The expansion proposal. So Ryan had been laying groundwork for this plan while I'd been focused on developing our latest software update. I trusted him to handle strategic planning. While I perfected the product that had attracted our biggest clients, the irony wasn't lost on me that my dedication to the technical excellence of TechFlow had blinded me to the coup being organized right under my nose.
"Oh, something like that,"
I said, accepting the printed documents Sophia handed me.
"I want to."
"Make sure I understand all the details before we move forward." As I scanned the incorporation papers, a detail I'd almost forgotten came rushing back. When I'd established TechFlow Solutions 3 years ago, I'd used the inheritance money from my grandparents to fund everything. The initial investment, the office lease, the first employee salaries, the equipment, the software licenses. Every penny had come from my personal funds. When Ryan joined the company, I'd offered him equity as compensation for his business development work, but the legal structure had been carefully crafted by Marcus Johnson, my family's attorney. Ryan owned exactly 10% of TechFlow Solutions. I owned 90%. But somewhere along the way, through casual conversations and my own desire to make Ryan feel like a true partner, I'd let him believe we had a 50-50 arrangement. I'd never explicitly stated the ownership percentages. And Ryan had apparently made assumptions based on our collaborative working relationship and shared decision-making process. The conference room door opened, and Ryan emerged with his usual confident stride, straightening his tie and checking his Rolex. Emma followed a few steps behind, her expression carefully neutral, but her cheeks slightly flushed. They were both skilled at maintaining their professional facades. I had to give them credit for that. "Alex," Ryan called out with the same enthusiasm he'd shown for the past 2 years. Perfect timing. I was just reviewing the expansion proposal with Emma. Her marketing insights have been invaluable for positioning our growth strategy. Emma smiled at me with the same warmth she'd shown every morning for the past year, reaching up to straighten my collar in the intimate gesture that had always made me feel cared for. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well? You were working so late on the database optimization last night. The casual deception was breathtaking." These were the same people who'd just been planning to steal my company and destroy my personal life, now performing their roles as loyal partner and loving fiancé with Oscar. Worthy skill. I wondered how long they'd been practicing this duplicity. How many conversations we'd had where they were actively plotting against me while smiling to my face. "I slept fine," I replied, studying their expressions carefully. "Actually, I've been thinking about our growth strategy too. Maybe we should schedule a comprehensive review of our company structure before we bring in any outside investors." For just a moment, I caught a flicker of concern in Ryan's eyes, quickly masked. By his usual business confidence. That's a great idea, Alex. Due diligence is always smart. Though I think our current structure is pretty solid for the kind of expansion we're considering. I'm sure it is, I said, allowing myself a small smile. I'm just looking forward to making sure everyone understands exactly where they stand. The next few days passed in a strange blur of normalcy and calculated observation. I found myself studying Ryan and Emma with fresh eyes, noticing details that had been invisible before. The way Emma's phone buzzed constantly during our dinner. Dates how she'd excuse herself for work calls that lasted 20 minutes. Ryan's newfound interest in our financial reports. Asking questions about revenue projections and client contracts that he'd never cared about previously. Wednesday evening, Emma and I were supposed to meet with our wedding planner at a venue on Lake Austin. She canceled last minute, claiming a migraine. But when I drove past the Four Seasons later that night, I spotted Ryan's silver BMW in the parking garage. The same car that had been mysteriously absent from the office during Emma's migraine. The pieces of their deception were becoming impossible to ignore. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to take a different approach. I scheduled a meeting with Marcus Johnson, the family attorney who'd handled TechFlow's incorporation. Marcus had been my grandfather's lawyer for 30 years, a sharp legal mind who'd guided our family through complex business decisions. His downtown office overlooked the Austin skyline, and as I sat across from his mahogany desk, I explained the situation without revealing the personal betrayal. I need to understand the exact ownership structure of TechFlow, I told him. There might be some confusion about percentages, and I want everything clarified before we consider bringing in investors. Marcus pulled out the original documents, his experienced eyes scanning the legal language with practiced efficiency. Alex, these papers are crystal clear. You own 90% of TechFlow Solutions, funded entirely by your initial investment of $500,000 from your grandparents' estate. Ryan Matthews owns 10%, granted as equity compensation for his business development role. There's no ambiguity here whatsoever.
Ow.
But what if someone believed the ownership was split differently?
Ow.
I asked carefully. What if they assumed it was a 50-50 partnership? Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression growing concerned. Any assumption like that would be legally meaningless. The incorporation documents are filed with the state, and the ownership percentages are explicitly stated. If someone is operating under a different assumption, they're either confused or deliberately ignoring the legal reality. He leaned back in his leather chair, studying my face. Alex, is someone challenging your ownership of the company?
Yes.
If they are, they don't have a leg to stand on. You could remove any minority shareholder from operational involvement, if necessary. The voting rights alone give you complete control. The weight of Marcus's words settled over me like armor. Not only did I own the vast majority of TechFlow, but I had the legal authority to make unilateral decisions about the company's direction. Ryan's entire plan depended on a false premise, and Emma had been gathering intelligence for a coup that could never succeed. Back at the office, I began implementing subtle changes to test my new understanding of the situation. I started attending client meetings that Ryan usually handled alone, asking detailed questions about contract negotiations and revenue projections. I noticed how uncomfortable Ryan became when I inserted myself into discussions he'd been managing. Independently, Alex, I appreciate your interest in the business development side, Ryan said after a particularly tense meeting with our restaurant chain client. But jumping into these relationships suddenly might confuse our established communication patterns. I think it's important for me to understand all aspects of the company I built, I replied evenly. After all, I want to make sure we're making the best decisions for TechFlow's future. The flicker of irritation in Ryan's eyes was unmistakable. He'd grown accustomed to operating with autonomy in his domain. My sudden involvement was disrupting whatever plans he'd been developing. With potential investors, meanwhile, Emma's behavior at home became increasingly erratic. She'd disappear for hours, claiming to be meeting with freelance marketing clients. But her explanations never quite added up. When I suggested we spend more time together, maybe take a weekend trip to San Antonio, she deflected with vague mentions of work commitments and wedding planning stress. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I just feel like we're both so busy with our careers right now, she said one evening as we sat on my penthouse balcony overlooking downtown Austin. Maybe we should focus on getting TechFlow to the next level before we worry about personal stuff. The irony was devastating. Emma was encouraging me to focus on the very company she was helping to steal, while simultaneously distancing herself from the relationship she was planning to abandon. I wondered if anything about our connection had been genuine, or if I'd been a convenient stepping stone toward the lifestyle she really wanted. Friday afternoon brought the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Ryan knocked on my office door with an unusual formality, carrying a leather portfolio. That suggested serious business. "Alex, I'd like to discuss the expansion opportunity we've been developing," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I've been working with some potential investors, and they're very interested in TechFlow's growth potential." "Tell me more," I said, leaning back in my chair with carefully neutral expression. Ryan opened his portfolio, revealing a detailed presentation, complete with financial projections and organizational charts. The scope of his planning was impressive and deeply troubling. He'd been developing this proposal for months, creating a comprehensive vision for TechFlow that positioned him as CEO while relegating me to a technical advisory role. The investors are prepared to inject $2 million for a significant equity stake, Ryan explained, his confidence growing. As he outlined the proposal, they want experienced leadership in place, someone who can guide TechFlow through rapid scaling. I've been discussing the possibility of restructuring our partnership to reflect the new organizational needs. "Restructuring how?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well, the investors prefer working with a single decision-maker." "Rather than a partnership structure," Ryan said, not quite meeting my eyes. "They've suggested that I take the CEO role while you focus on what you do best, the technical development. You'd retain significant equity, of course, but the operational control would shift to someone with more business experience." The audacity was breathtaking. Ryan was essentially proposing that I step aside from running the company I'd built. With my own money, my own vision, my own years of sacrifice, he wanted me to hand over control to him and his mysterious investors, accepting a subordinate role in my own creation. "That's an interesting proposal," I said calmly. "Who exactly are these investors?" Ryan's confidence faltered slightly. "They prefer to remain anonymous during initial discussions. Standard practice for this level of investment. But they're legitimate, established venture capital people with a track record of successful technology company scaling. And they specifically requested that you become CEO?" "They were impressed by my business development work and strategic vision," Ryan replied, his chest puffing with pride. "They feel that TechFlow needs more sophisticated leadership to reach its potential." I nodded thoughtfully, pretending to consider his proposal while my mind raced through the implications. Ryan had been meeting with investors behind my back, promising them a level of control he didn't have the authority to deliver. He'd constructed an elaborate fantasy about reshaping TechFlow's ownership and leadership, apparently convinced that I would simply agree to be demoted in my own company. "I'd like to meet these investors," I said finally. "Before I consider any major changes to TechFlow's structure, I want to understand their background and their specific plans for the company." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "They're very busy. People, Alex. We might want to move forward with the preliminary agreements before we get into detailed meetings." "I'm not signing anything without meeting the people who want to invest in my company," I stated firmly. "That's non-negotiable." For the first time since he'd entered my office, Ryan looked genuinely concerned.
Yes.
His entire plan depended on my cooperation, and I could see him realizing that I wasn't going to be as malleable as he'd expected. "Of course," he said, forcing a smile. "I'll arrange something for next week." After Ryan left my office, I sat alone with the weight of everything I'd discovered. The company I'd built was under attack from the inside, orchestrated by the two people I'd trusted most. But unlike the helpless victim Ryan expected me to be, I held every advantage. The legal ownership, the client relationships, the technical expertise, and now the complete knowledge of their plan. Sophia appeared in my doorway with her usual gentle knock. "Alex, I noticed Ryan seemed pretty intense about something. Everything okay?" I looked at Sophia, one of the few people whose loyalty I'd never questioned, and made a decision. Sophia, I need you to do something for me. Can you pull together a complete organizational chart showing all employee roles and reporting structures? Also, I want a comprehensive list of all client contracts and their terms. Sure, she replied, though her expression showed curiosity about the unusual request. Should I include the ownership percentages in the organizational chart? Definitely. Include those, I said with the first genuine smile I'd felt in days. I think it's time everyone understood exactly how TechFlow is structured. As Sophia left to compile the information, I began planning my next moves. Ryan and Emma thought. They were playing chess while I remained oblivious to the game. What they didn't realize was that I'd been watching every move. And I was about to reveal that I'd been playing a completely different game all along. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Austin air that usually energized me. But today, it carried the electric tension of an approaching storm. I'd spent the weekend reviewing every contract, every email thread, every financial document related to TechFlow's operations. What I discovered painted an even darker picture of Ryan's deception than I'd initially imagined. He'd been positioning himself as the primary company representative in communications with 3 major potential clients, subtly writing me out of future contract negotiations. Email chains showed him describing himself as TechFlow's managing partner and suggesting that major strategic decisions required his approval. He'd even gone so far as to set up preliminary discussions with a competing software firm about potential merger opportunities, apparently testing the market value of what he believed was his 50% stake. Most damning evidence came from Emma's laptop, which she'd left open on my kitchen counter Sunday morning while she showered. Her email account revealed months of correspondence with Ryan, including detailed financial analyses of TechFlow's worth and strategic plans for their post-takeover life together. They'd even looked at houses in Westlake, one of Austin's most expensive neighborhoods, calculating mortgage payments based on the company's sale they were planning. Once we restructure the ownership and bring in the investors, we'll have enough liquidity to live the life we actually deserve, Emma had written to Ryan just 3 days earlier. Alex is sweet, but so limited in vision. You understand what real success looks like? Ryan's response had been equally revealing. Don't worry about the transition. Alex will probably be relieved to step back from the business pressure. Some people are meant to be employees, not entrepreneurs. We're doing everyone a favor by taking control. The casual dismissal of my abilities and ambitions was almost more insulting than the betrayal itself. They'd convinced themselves that stealing my company was actually an act of kindness, freeing me from responsibilities I apparently couldn't handle. The condescension was breathtaking. I arrived at the office early that Monday, wanting to prepare for what I knew would be a pivotal week. Sophia had compiled the organizational documents I'd requested, and the stark clarity of the ownership structure was exactly what I needed. TechFlow Solutions. Alex Chen, 90%. Ryan Matthews, 10%. Simple, legal, indisputable. David Park, our mutual friend and one of TechFlow's software developers, stopped by my office with his usual Monday morning coffee and gossip update. David had been with the company for 18 months, recruited through Ryan's networking connections. But his loyalty had always seemed genuine rather than calculated. Hey, Alex. Weird question, David said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I was at a happy hour Friday night with some folks from other tech companies, and someone mentioned seeing Ryan at a VC meet downtown. Said he was talking about TechFlow like he was the CEO or something. Probably just a misunderstanding, right? The casual nature of David's question suggested he had no idea about the larger conspiracy. But his information confirmed that Ryan's investor meetings were real and ongoing. What exactly did they say he was telling people, I asked? Something about major expansion plans and bringing in outside leadership expertise, David replied with a slight frown. The person who mentioned it thought it was cool that TechFlow was growing so fast, but it seemed weird that Ryan was representing the company without you there. Very weird, I agreed, making a mental note to follow up on Ryan's unauthorized networking activities. David, hypothetically speaking, if there were major changes to TechFlow's structure, how do you think the development team would react? David's expression grew more serious. Honestly, most of us came here because we believed in your technical vision and the collaborative culture you've built. Ryan's great at the business stuff, but you're the heart of what makes TechFlow special. If that changed, I think you'd see some people updating their resumes. The loyalty in David's voice was reassuring, but it also highlighted how much Ryan's plan would damage the company culture I'd worked so hard to create. My employees had joined TechFlow because they believed in the mission and values I'd established. Ryan's corporate restructuring would destroy the very foundation that made TechFlow successful. Tuesday brought the investor meeting Ryan had promised to arrange. He'd scheduled it for 2 p.m. at the Four Seasons, the same hotel where he'd been conducting his affair with Emma. The location choice felt like a deliberate insult. Though I doubted Ryan realized I knew about his extracurricular activities there, I think this meeting will be really eye-opening for you, Ryan said, as we walked through the hotel lobby toward the conference room he'd reserved. These investors understand what it takes to scale a technology company in today's market. The two men waiting in the conference room looked exactly like the venture capitalists I'd expected. Expensive suits, confident handshakes, and the kind of polished presentation materials that suggested serious money. Tom Bradley and Michael Chen introduced themselves as partners at Lone Star Ventures, a mid-sized VC firm with a portfolio of successful Austin startups. We're very impressed with TechFlow's growth trajectory, Tom began, launching into a presentation that clearly demonstrated they'd done extensive research on our company. The market for small business automation software is expanding rapidly. You've positioned yourselves well in the restaurant and retail sectors. Our preliminary analysis suggests TechFlow could achieve a $10 million valuation within 18 months with proper strategic guidance, Michael added, clicking through slides that showed detailed financial projections. The numbers were genuinely impressive, and under different circumstances, I might have been excited about the growth potential they outlined. But as the presentation continued, it became clear that their entire investment thesis was based on assumptions Ryan had provided about TechFlow's ownership and leadership structure. We understand that Ryan would be taking the CEO position to guide this expansion, Tom continued, while Alex would focus on technical development and product innovation. That kind of specialized leadership division is exactly what we look for. In scaling companies, Ryan has outlined a compelling vision for market expansion and client acquisition, Michael added. His background in business development, combined with Alex's technical expertise, creates the perfect foundation for rapid growth. I listened quietly as they continued their pitch, occasionally asking clarifying questions about their investment terms and timeline expectations. Both investors seemed genuinely enthusiastic about TechFlow's potential. Their financial projections were based on solid market research. The tragedy was that Ryan had built this entire opportunity on a fundamental lie about his authority to negotiate. Before we discuss specific terms, I said finally, I want to make sure we're all operating with the same understanding of TechFlow's current ownership structure. Tom nodded approvingly. Absolutely. Due diligence is critical. In these discussions, I pulled out the incorporation documents Sophia had prepared, sliding copies across the conference table. These are TechFlow's official ownership records filed with the state of Texas. Both investors began reviewing the documents, and I watched. Their expressions changed as they processed the information. Tom looked confused first, then concerned. Michael's eyes widened as he read the ownership percentages. I'm not sure I understand, Tom said slowly, looking between the documents and Ryan's suddenly pale face. These papers show Alex Chen as owning 90% of TechFlow Solutions, with Ryan Matthews holding 10%. That's correct, I confirmed calmly. Right, cool. Turned to Ryan with obvious confusion. Ryan, you told us this was a 50-50 partnership between co-founders. Said you had equal decision-making authority and equivalent equity stakes. Ryan's confident demeanor crumbled as he realized his entire foundation was collapsing. There might be some confusion about the formal paperwork, he stammered. Alex and I have always operated as equal partners, regardless of the technical ownership percentages. There's no confusion, I said firmly. I founded TechFlow. With my own capital investment, Ryan joined the company as an employee with equity compensation. I appreciate his contributions to our business development. but I've never agreed to any partnership structure that would give him equal authority. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Michael exchanged glances that suggested they were reassessing everything they'd been told about this investment opportunity. Ryan sat frozen, apparently unable to process that his carefully constructed plan was disintegrating in real time. "Ryan," Tom said carefully, "you represented yourself as having the authority to negotiate major structural changes to TechFlow's ownership and leadership. If you don't actually have that authority, then we've been discussing a deal that can't legally proceed." "I can speak for the company," Ryan insisted desperately. "Alex, tell them we make decisions together. Tell them. We're partners." "We're not partners," I said quietly. "You're an employee with a small equity stake. You don't have the authority to commit TechFlow to any major changes without my approval." Michael was already packing up his presentation materials. "Mr. Matthews, it appears you've misrepresented the fundamental structure of this business. Opportunity. Lone Star Ventures can't proceed with discussions based on inaccurate information." "Wait," Ryan pleaded, his voice rising with panic. "Alex, you're being unreasonable. These investors could transform TechFlow into something amazing. Don't let personal ego destroy this opportunity." "This isn't about ego," I replied, standing to shake hands with the departing investors. "This is about honesty and legal reality." As Tom and Michael left the conference room, Ryan remained seated at the table, staring at the ownership documents as if willing them to change. The confident business developer who'd walked into this meeting had been replaced by someone who looked lost and confused. "Alex, we need to talk about this privately," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, we do," I agreed. "But not here." The drive back to TechFlow's office was suffocatingly silent. Ryan stared out the passenger window as downtown Austin blurred past, his usual confidence replaced by something between shock and desperation. I could practically hear the gears turning in his mind as he tried to salvage a situation that had spiraled completely beyond his control. "Alex, I think there's been a massive misunderstanding," he began as we pulled into the parking garage. "Beneath our building, I never meant to misrepresent anything to those investors. I genuinely believed we had an equal partnership arrangement." "Based on what?" I asked, turning off the engine but making no move to get out of the car. "What specific conversation or document led you to believe you owned 50% of my company?" Ryan's face flushed as he struggled to answer. "It was implied through our working relationship. You brought me in as a partner. You valued my input on major decisions. You gave me significant responsibility. I assumed that meant we were equals." "We assumed," I repeated slowly. "We built an entire business plan around an assumption without ever reviewing the actual legal documents or asking direct questions about ownership percentages." "That's not fair," Ryan protested, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "You never corrected my understanding. When I talked about our company and our decisions, you never said anything. If I was wrong, why didn't you set me straight?" The question hung in the air between us, and I realized he had a point. I had allowed the ambiguity to persist, enjoying the collaborative dynamic without considering how Ryan might interpret our professional relationship. But that didn't excuse the elaborate deception he'd constructed, or the affair that had motivated his corporate coup attempt. "You're right that I should have been clearer about the ownership structure," I admitted. "But that doesn't explain why you were meeting with investors behind my back, or why you thought you could restructure a company you didn't own." Ryan's expression shifted, and for a moment I saw something that looked like genuine remorse. I got caught up in the vision of what TechFlow could become. The investors were so enthusiastic, and they made it seem like the leadership change was necessary for growth. I thought you'd see the logic once everything was in place. "And Emma?" I asked quietly. "How does she fit into your vision of TechFlow's future?" The color drained from Ryan's face as he realized I knew about the affair. "Alex, that's completely separate from business considerations." "Is it because the emails I've seen suggest otherwise?" "You and Emma have been planning your post-takeover life together, including house shopping in Westlake based on the money you expected to make from selling my company." Ryan slumped against the car door, the last of his fight seeming to leave. "His body, you know about Emma and me." "I know about everything," I said. The affair, the investor meetings, the plans to push me out of TechFlow, the assumption that I'd just accept being demoted in my own company. What I don't understand is why you thought any of this would work. Because you're brilliant but naive, Ryan said with startling honesty. You're so focused on the technical side that you miss the bigger picture. Emma and I, we see the potential for real wealth, real influence. Your content building software for small restaurants. We wanted to build an empire, the casual. Dismissal of my ambitions was exactly what I'd seen in their private emails, but hearing it spoken aloud felt like a physical blow. So you decided to steal my company because you thought I lacked vision? Not steal, Ryan said quickly. Transform Guide. Give TechFlow the leadership it needed to reach its potential. Under your control with your girlfriend, using my money and my work? Ryan fell silent, apparently recognizing how his justifications sounded when spoken plainly. We sat in the parking garage for several more minutes, the weight of everything unsaid, pressing down between us. What happens now? He asked finally. Now we go upstairs and you clean out your office, I said, opening my car door. Your employment with TechFlow is terminated, effective immediately. Alex, wait, Ryan said desperately, following me toward the elevator. We can work through this. I made mistakes, but I can fix them. The company needs my business development relationships. The company needs employees I can trust, I replied as the elevator doors closed between us. You're not one of them anymore. Back in the office, word of Ryan's departure spread quickly through our small team. Sophia appeared at my door within minutes, her expression concerned but unsurprised. I heard Ryan is leaving, she said carefully. Is everything okay with the company? Everything is fine, I assured her. Ryan and I had different visions for TechFlow's future, and it seemed best for him to pursue other opportunities. What about the expansion plans he'd been discussing? And the investor meetings? Those plans are being reevaluated, I said diplomatically. TechFlow will continue growing, but we'll do it in a way that preserves our company culture and values. Over the next few hours, I met individually with each team member to address concerns and reassure them about TechFlow's stability. The conversations revealed how much Ryan's behavior had been affecting office morale without my realizing it. David mentioned feeling excluded from strategic discussions, while Jennifer from HR described tension around Ryan's increasingly authoritative management style. Honestly, Alex, it feels like a weight has been lifted, David said during our conversation. Ryan had good ideas, but he'd been making people feel like they needed to choose sides. The office dynamic has been weird for weeks. By evening, Ryan had cleared out his belongings and left his company laptop and access cards on my desk. His final email to the team was professionally cordial, thanking everyone for their collaboration and wishing TechFlow continued success. No mention of the circumstances behind his departure or the investor debacle that had precipitated his firing. But dealing with Ryan's professional exit was only half the challenge ahead of me. Emma was still living in my penthouse, still wearing my grandmother's ring, still maintaining the facade of our engagement while planning her escape to be with Ryan. That evening's confrontation would require a different kind of strength. I arrived home to find Emma cooking dinner in my kitchen, humming softly as she prepared what appeared to be my favorite pasta dish. The domestic scene felt surreal given everything I now knew about her true feelings and intentions. How was your day, sweetheart? She asked with her usual warmth, reaching up to kiss my cheek as I entered the kitchen. You seem stressed? Did something happen at work? Ryan is no longer with TechFlow, I said simply, watching her face for any reaction. Emma's carefully maintained expression faltered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. No, what happened? Did you two have a disagreement about the expansion plans? Something like that, I replied, pouring myself a glass of wine and settling at the kitchen island. The investor meeting didn't go as planned. I'm sorry to hear that, Emma said, though her voice carried an odd tension. Are you okay? I know how much the company means to you. The performance was flawless, but I could see the calculation behind her concerned expression. She was trying to gauge how much I knew while maintaining plausible deniability about her. Involvement in Ryan's schemes? Emma, we need to talk, I said finally, setting down my wine glass and meeting her eyes directly. Of course, she replied, though something in her posture suggested she was preparing for battle rather than conversation. "I know about you and Ryan." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Emma's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, fear, defiance, before settling on a mask of confused innocence. "What do you mean?" she asked, but her voice lacked conviction. "I mean, I know about the affair, the business plans, the house hunting in Westlake, all of it. I've seen the emails, Emma. I know you've been working together to take over TechFlow." Emma set down the wooden spoon she'd been using to stir the pasta sauce, her hands trembling slightly. "Alex, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I said, calmly, "but I'm not sure I want to hear it." The facade finally cracked, and Emma's true feelings showed through. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Ryan sees potential in TechFlow that you're too scared to pursue. He has vision, ambition, real plans for success, and I don't." "You're comfortable," Emma said with growing confidence, as if she'd been waiting months to voice these criticisms. "You're satisfied building small business software when you could be creating something revolutionary. Ryan understands what it takes to build real wealth." "Real wealth," I repeated. "Is that what this is about? Money?" "It's about living up to our potential instead of playing it safe," Emma shot back. "Ryan and I, we want the same things. We're compatible in ways that you and I never were." The honesty was brutal, but somehow refreshing after months of deception. "Then why didn't you just break up with me? Why the elaborate corporate takeover plan?" Emma's expression hardened. "Because you built something valuable, and Ryan knew how to unlock its real worth. We weren't trying to hurt you, Alex. We were trying to help everyone reach their potential. By stealing my company and destroying our relationship, by creating opportunities for growth that you were too cautious to pursue alone." I stared at Emma, this woman I'd thought I loved, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. The person I'd fallen for had either never existed or had been thoroughly replaced by ambition and greed. "Pack your things," I said quietly. "I want you out of my home tonight." "Alex, please," Emma said, her anger dissolving into desperate pleading. "We can work through this. Ryan made mistakes, but that doesn't mean we can't salvage our relationship. Our relationship ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for your ambitions," I replied, walking toward my home office. "The ring is on my dresser. Please leave it there when you go." 6 months later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of TechFlow's new headquarters in the Domain, watching the Austin skyline shimmer in the late afternoon heat. The view from our expanded office space captured the entire city, from the gleaming towers downtown to the rolling hills that stretched toward the horizon. It was a perspective I'd never imagined when I started the company in my cramped apartment 3 years ago. TechFlow had grown exponentially since Ryan's departure, but not in the way he'd envisioned. Instead of chasing venture capital and aggressive expansion, I'd focused on organic growth, driven by exceptional client service and innovative solutions. The restaurant chain that Ryan had been managing renewed their contract with a 50% increase, specifically citing their satisfaction with my direct involvement in their account. Word spread quickly through Austin's tight-knit business community about TechFlow's commitment to personalized service and technical excellence. 3 competing software firms had approached me with acquisition offers, but I'd turned them all down. Building something valuable wasn't about creating the fastest exit strategy. It was about creating something sustainable and meaningful. Had been promoted to operations director, and her first initiative was implementing a transparent company culture where ownership, decision-making authority, and growth plans were clearly communicated to every employee. The team had responded with a level of engagement and loyalty that proved my instincts about company culture had been correct all along.
"Alex?"
"The Chronicle reporter is here for your interview," Sophia called from the elevator lobby, interrupting my reflection on the city below. The Austin Business Chronicle had requested a feature story about TechFlow's growth and my approach to building a successful technology company without external investors. The timing felt appropriate given how much had changed since the day I'd overheard Ryan and Emma planning their corporate coup. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Morales, settled into my office with the kind of preparation that suggested she'd done extensive research on TechFlow's recent trajectory. Mr. Chen TechFlow has achieved remarkable growth over the past 6 months. She began consulting her notes. What do you attribute to this success, especially given the departure of your former business development partner? I think we've benefited from focusing on our core strengths rather than trying to transform into something we weren't ready to become, I replied carefully. Sometimes the best growth strategy is doing excellent work for clients who value quality over quantity. There are rumors that you turned down significant venture capital investment earlier this year. Can you comment on that decision? We evaluated several potential partnerships, but ultimately decided that maintaining control of our company culture and client relationships was more important than rapid scaling, I said, which was technically accurate without revealing the full story of Ryan's deception. And your former partner, Ryan Matthews? Industry sources suggest there was some disagreement about the company's direction. Ryan is a talented business developer who had different visions for TechFlow's future. Sometimes professional relationships evolve, and it's better for everyone when people pursue paths that align with their individual goals. Patricia nodded, making notes about my diplomatic non-answer. What's next for TechFlow? Are you planning any major expansions or new service offerings? We're always looking for ways to better serve our clients and grow sustainably. Most exciting thing about where we are now is that we have the freedom to make strategic decisions based on what's best for our clients and our team, rather than external pressures or investor expectations. After the interview concluded, I walked Patricia to the elevator. Reflecting on how different this conversation felt compared to the anxiety and uncertainty I'd experienced 6 months ago, TechFlow's success wasn't just about financial metrics or market position. It was about building something authentic and sustainable with people I trusted and respected. That evening, I had dinner at Uchi with David and several other team members to celebrate the completion of our latest client project. The conversation flowed easily between technical challenges, industry trends, and the kind of creative problem-solving that had originally inspired me to start TechFlow. Alex, can I ask you something personal? David said as we walked back to our cars after dinner. Do you ever regret how things went down with Ryan and the investor situation?
A question.
Surprised me with its directness, but I appreciated David's honesty. I regret that the situation became as complicated as it did, but I don't regret protecting TechFlow's independence and values. For what it's worth, the company feels completely different now. More collaborative, more focused on actual solutions. Rather than corporate politics, I think you made the right choice. As I drove home to my penthouse, I reflected on the unexpected turns my life had taken. The betrayal that had initially felt devastating had ultimately forced me to clarify my priorities and take full ownership of my company's direction. Ryan and Emma's attempt to steal my business had inadvertently pushed me to become a stronger leader and a more confident entrepreneur. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Ryan had started his own consulting firm, though it was struggling to gain traction without the client relationships and technical expertise he'd taken for granted at TechFlow. Emma had moved to Dallas with him, but their relationship had reportedly become strained under the pressure of financial uncertainty and professional setbacks. The irony wasn't lost on me that their pursuit of real wealth had led them to a less stable and less prosperous situation than they'd started with. Meanwhile, TechFlow's organic growth had generated more revenue and market value than Ryan's aggressive expansion plans could have achieved. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Johnson, my family attorney, confirming that the final legal documentation for TechFlow's new headquarters lease had been completed. The message reminded me how far I'd come from that morning 6 months ago when I desperately needed confirmation of my own company's ownership structure. Standing on my balcony overlooking the Austin skyline, I raised a glass of wine and a silent toast to the future. TechFlow was thriving. My team was stronger than ever. I'd learned invaluable lessons about trust, leadership, and the importance of building something authentic rather than chasing other people's definitions of success. The city lights twinkled below like stars, each one representing someone pursuing their own version of the American dream. Some would achieve it through deception and manipulation, others through collaboration and hard work. I was grateful too. Have discovered which path suited me better, even if the lesson had come at a painful personal cost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new decisions about TechFlow's direction. But for the first time in years, I felt completely confident in my ability to navigate whatever came next. After all, I'd already survived the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger on the other side. The future stretched ahead with unlimited possibility, and I was ready to embrace it on my own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.